to the Australian Slackline Association, episode 4 of our Access Series podcast. Excited today to have co-hosting with me Arthur Pera, and our guest is Tomas Buckingham from ISA, current president of International Slackline Association. So Arthur, excited that he's joining us. My first memory of Arthur when I first met him was hopping off my first ever highline at Rapidly's, and quite in shock that it was so scary and quite sad that I'd done so poorly and hadn't been able to stand up. And I remember Arthur giving me a high five and a hug, and I think that says a lot about his character, and he's been a big contributor to the Australian slacklining community for a long time, 2 years recently as the president of Australian Slackline Association, and works as an IRADA technician, being a level 3 for 7 years. So yeah, welcome Arthur, and excited to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Dan. First of all, thank you for creating this podcast and sharing all the knowledge about slacklining, specifically about Access right now. And we are really excited tonight because we have Tomas Buckingham here. And I'll just read a little intro about him if you don't know him already. So Tomas has been the vice president of the ISA since 2015. And was elected the president of the ISA in 2018. He started slacklining in 2007 and has been highlining since 2008. As president of the national level Swiss Slackline Federation since 2013 and founding member of Slack Attack, which is a local slackline association in Bern, founded in 2009, he has over a decade of experience in slackline-related volunteer work and community organization. Standing out, Tomas has volunteered and helped organize numerous events such as the Bern City Slack, Transalp Waterline Tour, ISA Safety Event, the Highline Extreme, Swiss Slackline Championships, and the Highline World Championship in Lax, if I'm not wrong how to pronounce. So, consequently, he's one of the driving forces behind the logistics and organizational development of the ISA right now. And we are pleased to have you tonight, Tomas. So thank you very much for joining us.
Guys, thanks for having me. Thanks for the possibility to join your podcast. It's nice to be part of such a format. I myself enjoy listening to podcasts a lot, so nice that this format also found its way into the slackline world.
Awesome,
yeah,
man.
Great to be here.
Yeah, cool. Well, it's in the morning for you, so you're just getting your day started. But I'll just kick off with a simple question. Everybody wants to know that first in hand, which is, how did you get into slacklining and then progressed into highlining?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not a very spectacular story. I basically was living in a shared flat in the middle of the city of Bern, and one of my roommates just brought home one of those ratchet strap lines and basically threw it on the table and said, well, this is a slackline. And of course, I didn't even know the term by then. I didn't know what to do with it. I went with her to her little local place between two trees and rigged it, and I got hooked immediately. It was like 2 minutes in, and it was clear to me that this was going to stick with me for a long time. And I just started practicing. I got to know quite a few slackliners from the city, and that was around 2007, 2008. So there was like an active community already. And within a couple months, the idea came up that we should be trying highlining. We've been climbing since we were kids, so it was kind of obvious to take this to the heights. And I met a couple friends who had like a thesis they were doing on highlining, which was quite fun because I was like at a better level in slacklining than they were, and they kind of have thought a lot about the rigging already. So we kind of got together and we rigged our first highlines around end of 2007, beginning 2008. And looking back, these were safe highlines. I would still hop on them today, which is like not what you hear from most people when they talk about their first highline. So I'm glad to have like a safe first highline story, and it pretty much continued like that. I met Bernhard Witz, which you guys might know, around 2008 as well. It was just a coincidence. He was also living in Bern as I. So we did some highlines together early on, and from there it just took off, and we went highlining pretty much every weekend from maybe 2009, 2010 on. Yeah. That's pretty much it, and it took off, and like Bernhard and I, which were probably one of the two most active highliners around Central Europe back then, with some people you might know, like Alex Schulz, and there's lots of people who also don't highline anymore nowadays. We just saw that there's a huge highline trend coming around 2012. I remember how social media exploded around that time when it came to highlining. When I started, you couldn't find a single slackline video on YouTube. You could put slackline into Google, nothing appeared that made any sense. There was a couple forums back then, which you kind of had to sneak yourself into, and of course we were on those. But really, 2012 is kind of where it took off globally. You could see lots of lines being rigged in Europe, in North and South America, and that's also when Bernhard and I decided to create one of those first versions of we called it the 10 most important points of highlining. So like some recommendation papers. It was a big discussion back then. Do we even want to put this on paper? Is it going to have like a positive effect only, or is it going to get people into highlining who have no clue and lead to more accidents? So this was a big discussion for me. It was clear that it will have a good effect, and it turned out to be like that. It was one of the most published, most read documents with thousands of downloads on our website. Back then it was still on the Swiss Slackline website, and it got translated to more than a dozen languages. So this was kind of one of the first collaborative documents, which we also involved like lots of people from mostly Central Europe back then to kind of do some collaborative work on highline safety. That was like after the big internet forums, one of the first like things you could really download and was spread widely.
Okay, and do you remember how and when was the first access issue that you experienced or you heard of back in the day?
Yeah, so on a very local level, there's been disputes since the beginning. So I remember in the really early days when you put up a highline, you were mostly surrounded by maybe some climbers. And they were, in most cases, they were, astonished. They kind of couldn't imagine that, this could lead to any problems with them. The highlines, you have to imagine, were much shorter. So you occupied a pretty small space on a cliffside. The groups were small, so that was not so much an issue in the beginning. But early on, you could, there were some mostly climbers, but also people that have worked in, let's say, climbing federations, or people that have dealt with the issue from the climbing side, that kind of started putting up the warning finger towards us. Okay, you're gonna encounter problems in the future, they always said. And of course, local land managers were the first to take notice. Really, the first kind of access issues that shut down some of our highlining were some land management plans I knew of early on in Switzerland that kind of really shut off areas that we've been using for a couple of years, around 2011, 2012. And this turned out to really be one case where highlining is not allowed anymore in Switzerland, due to mostly nature protection, mostly bird protection. But it also involved the climbing there. So it was not just highlining. It was a very obvious spot. It was Cré du Vent in the Jura Mountains. Really nice cliffside, about 150 meters high or so. And it was also one of the first contacts I had with Swiss Climbing Association, and I tried to kind of talk to them about getting potential access back, and turned out to be not successful. But that was an early kind of warning sign. But honestly, like the first time I really thought in detail about this was at a conference that was organized. I can't remember the year. It must have been around 2012 as well, by the German Alpine Federation. They organized a slackline conference, and they invited mostly climbers. Like Heinz Zock was there. Maybe you know this guy. He's a very famous Austrian climber. He was one of the guys that brought slacklining from the US to Europe. He did a presentation on the early days of slacklining and highlining. But then there were these access people from the Climbing Federation, and they kind of took everything, all the problems there were in climbing, and just like on the PowerPoint slides, just replaced it with slacklining. And that was way before we had like widespread problems, but it was one of the early warning signs we got that this will be a bigger issue in the future, and it turned out.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to hear how it all started over there, because how can we compare in Australia? The way we are set up here, we have the national parks and the city councils, and they usually have a written 20-year long guideline, which is called the plan of management, which should be pretty similar to what you guys have. And at this stage, we are trying to get slacklining recognized into the plan. But then we also heard that in Switzerland, you guys also just recently got slacklining as a legitimate sport in the country itself. So would you be able to just tell us a little bit, how did that come about, and how's that going to make slacklining, I don't know, access wise easier for us to deal with authorities and stuff like that?
Yes. So, like, one of the main issues I encountered with trying to get access to a certain spot, and specifically I saw this a lot when it came to actually building slackline infrastructure. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that later. This means slackline parks, specifically made for slacklining, with poles and like artificial anchors and so on. So we had early plans on creating those, and whenever I proposed something like this, one of the arguments, be it from land managers or from city councils or even from the department responsible for infrastructure, or even the police, they very often said like, yeah, what the heck is this even? Is this actually a legit thing? Like, what are the risks associated with it? What exactly are you doing here? So lots of them haven't heard about it. So it was clear early on that we kind of had to go in direction of letting people know what our activity actually is, what we're doing, and how this is played out. So one of the ways to do this is obviously through these structures we have built, organizations, being it regional, local, or national organizations that specifically deal with slacklining. So the way I see it, these very much are communication vehicles for slacklining. Most of them have a website. They have different communication channels. So if you start going in down this rabbit hole of like sports federations, how classic sports behave, how they're organized, you always end up at the point where you want to kind of go into a larger network of organizations. The way it works in Switzerland is we have a national rooftop federation for all sports federations. This national rooftop organization is called Swiss Olympic. It basically involves all the classical Olympic sports, but also all the non-Olympic sports are part of this federation. So they kind of bunched everything together in one big rooftop federation. And there's a whole list of criteria you have to fulfill. For example, you need more than 20 local or regional clubs within the borders of Switzerland, that basically promote slacklining on a city, on a regional, on a local level. Then within those clubs, you need more than 1,000 members, so individuals that are part of these 20 clubs. And you need to exist for 5 years. You need to be in charge of national competitions. So they want to see that you do a competition every single year, usually in more than one discipline. So these are like the bigger criteria. There's a whole list of about 35 criteria that you have to fulfill. You need like a national trainer program. You need obviously communication channels. So these are like criteria they want to see. And we knew this early on when we created Swiss Slackline in 2013, that we need to put this into our articles, that these are our kind of long-term goals, and we just need to steadily work on those. So at the end, it took us 9 years to basically apply to Swiss Olympic to become a member. And it was a 1-year process just of applying, interviews with them, meeting up. And then last October, we managed to, so pretty much a bit more than a year ago, we managed to become official member, which is like an indirect sports recognition for slacklining in Switzerland. Now, this is like really the base level, right? So now we are a member, but obviously we're far from classic sports, which means like now within Swiss Olympic to progress, there's like several levels. There's like, say, 6 levels, and we're now on level 6. And you can slowly work yourself up. A sport like slacklining has the possibility to maybe reach, let's say, level 4 or 5, but it will never go in direction of, the classic big sports with hundreds of thousands of people actively doing this every week. So even though being at level 4 or 5, it gives you obviously even now at level 6, we have quite a strong say in talking to third parties, be it officials, landowners, and so on. And just basically, it's very simple. You say, okay, we are a member of Swiss Olympic, and they recognized us as a rooftop federation for slacklining. And this already, in many discussions, is a game changer, because you can really like see their head turning and going like, okay, how can that be? How can they be in this rooftop federation without me knowing, first of all? That's what they usually think. But then also it kind of reconfigures their thinking about slacklining in general. And usually what they automatically do is they kind of compare it then to traditional sports, right? So they go like, oh, so you have like competitions, right? This is like the public is very much on the side of like, okay, how does a normal sport work, right? How do I see a normal sport? It's usually through some TV program where I see like some countries battling each other on the field or something like that. So they very much do that link immediately. The competition is a very strong link people, like the public, has. And then in most cases, we can answer this because we have done this here on a small scale, but we have had national competitions, we've held international competitions in Switzerland. So we can like say, yes, we do this. And then the next link they usually do is, okay, so people actually train this on a regular basis. And then, of course, we can say, yes, we do it all the time. And for this, we actually need training spots. So we need spots that we can access all the time. We have up lines, we have up perma-rig, and we have, in Switzerland, especially important, we have winter trainings. So from October to April, we need to go indoors. There's very little possibilities to stay outdoors all the time. So we have gyms with rodeo lines, long lines, even in some cases high lines. We can access multiple times per week in every city, and this then keeps the community alive over the winter. And then you don't have to start over with a new community in spring again. This is really the game changer for people who really are into it, want to train multiple times per week. And that's kind of the link to access, right? So for us, a big thing in terms of access is actually access in winter. So having access to indoor areas. And then in the summer, we have maybe a window of 5-6 months where we can go outside, we can go high altitude, highlining and so on. And there it's really a different access story where we are very closely linked, obviously, to the access issues with the climbing community. We have the same pathways, we use similar spots, and we have a really close relationship. And that's the next one. Like this networking, it doesn't just go towards Swiss Olympic as a national rooftop federation for sports, but it goes really also in terms of networking with other access institutions, being Swiss Alpine Club, being it also there's networks for accident prevention. There's networks in case there is an accident on how to deal with those. So we also are working with these federations or clubs that kind of deal with accident prevention, risk management, and so on. So yeah, it's really multifaceted. A key player in Switzerland is also the Swiss University Sports. So a federation where all the universities are in one network, because we have learned that one of the big drivers around Central Europe to get people into slacklining are the universities. So higher education allows free sports for everyone who is at these schools or universities, and in these programs we really try to push slacklining. So as an example, in Bern here we have 4 slackline trainings per week, indoor trainings in the winter, with like 7-8 slacklines rigged all the time. So you can pretty much go slacklining every evening, because we also have indoor trainings through Slack Attack, and you can go to other cities if you want. So if you want in Switzerland, you can train every single day in the winter, and that's really a big game changer in terms of getting people to slackline and having access in the winter.
Okay. Looks like we had a bit of a cut on the previous sentence you said, but I just wanted to throw back quickly to when you said in regards to you needed 20 different clubs inside of your association. Did you have already those clubs set up, and did they have to be like official as an association? And also about the members, you also said 1,000 members or something like that. How hard was it for you to get to those 1,000 members? And because we looked up to see how we can also do that, and they've got really similar requirements, which are 1,000 members, clubs, competitions, stuff like that. So feels really similar, but we just can't see how we're going to get there. So if you can tell us a little bit, how do you do that?
These are hard criteria, and they really keep small federations away from these sports recognitions. So the honest answer is these were the 2 hardest criteria to reach. I think we are quite lucky in Switzerland to have a very easy legal system for associations. It's not a coincidence that very big international slackline federations, and also the IOC, so the International Olympic Committee, and all these other big international federations actually have their seat in Switzerland, their headquarters. And the reason is because our law allows to create associations very easily, very informally, and there's not even a national register for associations, which is crazy. So you can just create it, and it's done by you creating it. And then, very typical for Switzerland, basically as soon as you have a bank account, you're official. So it's very easy to create associations. You need very few people, and what we have done very early on is we have on our Swiss Slackline website, we basically offered all the templates for local associations to basically quickly create a local structure to then usually have a very specific purpose. So most of the associations around here that are created and still are being created. So this year we have like 2 new associations in Switzerland, and it's about the average 1 to 2 new ones per year. Usually has to do with gaining access. So many of the associations were created, for example, to have those winter training. Some associations were created to gain access to one specific spot, which they know is important for their local community. Other associations were created because they have like a very specific like gym or thing they want to do. So it's usually just 1 or 2 small things which makes them start a new association or club. And because they take all our templates from our website, part of these templates usually automatically like makes them involved with us. So we get in contact immediately, and they immediately also become a member, because what we can offer them as a local club are right now, it's like 2 things they really strive for. One is we have one central insurance, third-party insurance for all slackline clubs that are a member. So they don't have to buy their own insurance. They can just join us. They immediately have third-party insurance. So that's something everybody asks for here. If you open it, do slacklining in a gym or your outdoor spot, or like there's some perma-rig spots that use this as well, and they immediately have this third-party insurance. The second thing is we have a centralized member management system. So we basically pay a yearly membership, a yearly fee to give this management system to all our local clubs. So basically signing up new members goes centralized through one system, and they can just send out their yearly bill through that system. If they want, they can manage their finances in that system. They don't have to. But it's kind of one of those club management online programs, and we offer them this immediately, so they don't have to deal with like keeping their Excel sheets and so on. So these are like the 2 main things we offer as a federation, which immediately makes sense for every local club.
Okay, awesome. Dan, do you want to ask
I
a
got
question?
a couple of good questions. I think when I first looked up Swiss Slackline from afar, I thought, geez, those guys are having some wins, and naively thought that you guys were doing it easier than us, in that maybe you hadn't had as much access issues, or they're doing waterline gatherings and they're recognised as a sport and stuff. But clearly, you've had your access challenges, which you mentioned back 9 years ago, or whatever the first ones, and we're seeing more of an uptake in access issues now. We're getting more people into the sport, especially highlining. And to achieve what you have, getting it recognised as a sport, has taken a lot of work and a lot of people, I assume. So looking back, what things do you think work to motivate and inspire people to be sort of part of this movement to making associations and be turning into a sport? I mean, the admin and the website sort of setup sounds like one of them, but how did you motivate enough people to be on board with this thing?
The honest answer is we're not that many people. Switzerland is not big. Switzerland is very small. We have 7 million inhabitants. The big advantage of Switzerland is everything is close. That's a big difference to how you guys are. You're spread out. Sorry. And so since we are close, since the beginning, we also, we can meet each other on a regular basis. It's easy to kind of communicate. We see each other several times per year, so we could kind of stay like in a close loop. This is like really a big advantage we have, right? So when I say 2 new clubs were created, both of those clubs are not even a half an hour from here. They're really close. And so this net of clubs, you could say, okay, half an hour, this is so close. Why don't they just go to the gym of this other club, right? But they actually want it in front of their own doorstep. And they want to do their own thing. They're their own people. Like one of the key things is to have this kind of rooftop structure, but still allow these local regions to flourish by themselves and create their own things, and don't try to kind of block them from doing their own thing, right? So this is it's also very Swiss thinking, I know, but at some point they need to be able to do their own thing, but they also need to see the benefits of joining a bigger structure. So both needs to be possible. So you also need to allow this within your articles to have this local flourishing, but still have some benefits of joining the bigger picture, right? So both needs to be there. That's one thing. And the other thing is obviously most of the communities at some point have access problems in most cases. As soon as they pop up and they kind of reach out to you, offer them a helping hand, and they will remember this. And then they will later on join and help the whole thing. So it's like this is where I see the national federations have an important role in actually supporting these local communities with access, with experience from other places. So that's a key thing. And we're not many people, there's a handful of people in Switzerland that work on this, right, and have worked on this. And I've been certainly pushing it forward a lot over the past years. And something I see in most countries around the world where a national federation popped up is that it's a very small group of people, dedicated group of slackliners that pushes forward the whole thing for the entire country. And then keeping the people together is the big challenge, So you really want to have flourishing communities that see the benefit in the bigger picture, but then you also want, obviously, usually 1 or 2 things they need, So as I said, for us, it's insurance and this management thing. And then obviously like the resources on our website, which they can use. But it's not this, there's not 20 things, right? Because usually people struggle with seeing the bigger picture and they think very locally, which is all good. It's very important. Access issues usually are solved regionally, locally, by the people who actually care about them. If you come from the outside, you can help them on a very high level, but it's hard because you usually cannot talk to the land managers. You cannot meet those. So they have a very strong interest in solving this problem by themselves, and it usually creates a group of people that is really dedicated. The game changer usually is if you can achieve a good access solution. For like that's the game changer for everyone, because what do we need, right? We need a community, we need gear, and we need the spot, right? And usually, in most countries, the community is not big of an issue, or sometimes it is, but you can solve it. Gear is solvable. It's hard in some countries, but it's solvable. If you lose the spot, it's done, right? Where do you go? You have to find another spot. You have to go further, travel further, or that's a community killer. It's a slackline killer. So gaining access is really one of the key things to actually make local and then also at the end national structures flourish. You need these spots, right? So fighting for spots, fighting for a spot for several years makes so much sense, because you solve a problem that you can flourish then 25, 50 years after that if you have solved it, right? So it takes maybe 2, maybe 5 years, maybe longer to solve this problem, but it actually will help so many people in the future to be able to go slackline or highline there. This is what most people, they only recognize this once they lose access to it, right? And that's when they learn. And that's when they see, okay, we need to come together and kind of gather as a local club, or work with the national federation. And as ISA, as the International Federation, we're even further away. We're so far away from local access issues, and they're so different. And usually, from my experience, most of those issues are solved by talking to people on a local level. And then, of course, we can, send whatever letters of recommendations or give our inputs on land management plans and so on. All important things. But if you do not gain the trust of these local entities, you will not get the access. It's even you have nice land management plans, but at the end, the person in charge needs to trust you in a way. And the National Federation, the International Federation are communication vehicles which give even a local manager trust in an activity. It tells them, okay, this is a real thing. Like in Switzerland, you are a real sport. Okay, so it makes sense to everyone that then people need to actually go somewhere and do the sport. So this is like the starting point of the discussion. If you don't have that starting point, it gets hard, You really struggle you've done this several times, explaining what slacklining is, how safe it is, compare it to other sports. So this is a classic discussion we all have to hold, and we will be holding for a long time in the future, but it needs to be done, These people need to understand that we're a legit activity, and we actually need places to go slackline and highline and practice it. And it's not just about like before I talked about like the athlete's perspective, like we need to train, we need to go there several times a week. That's one way of seeing it, right? But you also have the simple right of just going to nature, going to public lands, and doing this responsibly. And this is also a right you have as an activity, and you need to also argue with that side, not just the sports aspect.
Like a recreational activity and like mental health benefits, not just physical, that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's usually harder to argue, right? So recreational things, for them, it's easy to cut off. Much easier than when you say, okay, we actually, we want to have maybe some educational aspect to it, or we have some through getting access there, you might have an event at some place, and we actually teach people safe practice and so on. We also teach them other ethical things like leave no trace and such things. So you can kind of link other things to that access story, which makes sense to know. If you just keep it recreational, just because I want to do it, because I have the right, it's too easy usually, and it's easy for them to just cut it off. So you need to add different layers to this discussion. And obviously, in our cases, we learn best from the climbing. access stories, because they also have this recreational background, but they also do more than that, right? So if you go to national associations or federations, you usually see that they have an educational aspect to it. They have a sports aspect to it. They have a gear aspect to it. So they have like all these different views of pushing the activity. You need to use all those arguments.
And how important is it, as you were speaking about community and catching up, it made me realize that all our sort of unofficial gatherings that we have in different states are kind of at risk. All the locations are at risk and they may not be able to continue. And I guess, are they important? Are they worth trying to negotiate a place where you're definitely allowed to do it for the next 25 years? Or
they will reach that point where they have to do that, yes. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So if let's say if the spot is really hidden and you have nobody seeing it and the gathering being, unpublished and there's never a video or a picture of it, yes, but how realistic is that? So at some point you will always reach an access issue of some sort. It will always be there, and it just increases exponentially the more people go there, the more often you visit the spot. That's where it really takes off, right? If you just have a gathering there once per year, it can maybe exist for 20 years, That's like GGBY, they thought, for the first 5-6 years, nobody's seeing us here, nobody's there, right? But then it became more and more official. So like lots of people also, and this is really like one of the big challenges we have with the growth of our activity right now, right? So people are aware of it. They know if more and more people come to this one spot, which they may call their own spot, they know themselves that it will turn into an access problem. So what do? They limit the access themselves, They keep their own group small. They don't communicate if they go. They visit the spot only at certain times where they know nobody's around. So they have all these rules in place for themselves, which of course are not written down. They're all informal, but they keep kind of the access problem on a low level, right? So this is actually a big factor to actually that actually holds us back as slackliners, that we kind of restrict ourselves already a lot in certain spots, which also makes sense to some point. This also exists in climbing and in other sports, but at the end of the day, it's like this threshold, right? You can keep this like flame burning on a very low level and it works, but then at some point, usually it switches over and you will get more people, you will get regular meetings there, and the access problems pop up. So having kind of discussions early on with land managers and landowners, if you like feel okay, it could make sense, there is a certain chance, it's maybe not this year and maybe not in 5 years, but maybe you can negotiate something in the mid or even far future that can solve this. As soon as you have this solution, nobody has to restrict themselves anymore, or the restriction is clearly defined, right? Seasonal restriction or amount of people, amount of lines. And usually it's a compromise, right now, maybe the solution is better than this compromise. So you don't want to work in this direction. That's definitely something I see happening a lot around here as well. That we're now at a point where the activity is big enough that people are aware of these future access problems. So they start restricting themselves and their communities. And it's a big factor to not grow the community because of access problems or future access problems. So solving access problems on a local scale and allowing access to specific spots, which means maybe in a compromise you have to not go to another spot, or it's maybe then clear that you have to change some of your habits, in the long run makes total sense. And that's what climbing federations have been doing now for decades. They kind of try, like, whatever started informally, they try to formalize on a path to actually allow sustainable access in a way, right? And we are just so small yet that we are just starting to understand this. And but I think we can learn a lot from them. If we start now and we kind of do this intelligently and with good people, right? It needs good communicators. It needs people that can actually, step in an office with an official and hold a good presentation and convince them of trusting them and the activity. It's possible, but then the official always says, well, who comes after you, So you always have to go there not as an individual, but in the name of some bigger structure which can take over once you're not there anymore. So they need this trust. This trust game needs to start. And I understand that a lot of people, they just want to go slacklining. They don't care about dealing with officials or access issues. But also they at some point will come to you and ask for your help on solving their local access problem. So yeah, it's just long or short-term thinking, in my opinion.
So essentially what you were saying is to try to avoid to burn out these spots that we use now that we have access, by sort of like not having too many people, but at the same time trying to approach the land managers as soon as possible, because then when, let's say, you get caught one day on that very particular spot which is hidden in the bush, at least you already started a conversation, or it's easier to ask for forgiveness, not for permission. So how do you see this?
I think there's no general solution to this. At the end of the day, as I said, it's a discussion that you can have with landowners and land managers, but they need to be at least partially open to this discussion. So usually, like, getting them to know your structures, getting them to know a couple people, even before you discuss a specific spot, helps, right? Because usually what they are struggling is actually with having, like, if something happens or somebody reports some access problem to them, what they're struggling with is actually trying to find someone to contact. And for them, it's always easier to say no then. Okay, you're not allowed anymore, don't do this. But if they have someone to call, say like, hey, look, we have this issue, somebody was seen highlining there, blah, blah, blah. It already gives you like an opportunity to actually start a good discussion with them, right? So getting to know them before the access issue pops up is one good way to kind of maybe have a solution sooner than later. I also know that this doesn't always make sense and always work. So it's really on a social level that you have to decide, is it worth like being or contacting these people up front? Sometimes, to be blunt and honest, they appreciate it, and they kind of they know this already from climbing. It was the same, some guy bolted some routes and then suddenly more people went there, and so they already know these stories. It's nothing new to them. But simply, I mean, this has become clear around the world, asking for permission before you go to rig every highline just doesn't work. We know this doesn't work, So you all always in this gray zone. So you have to kind of decide, okay, how much communication do I do? who do I kind of involve beforehand? How regular will I use the spot? Is it a one-time thing? Is it something where as soon as you go regularly, you probably will not get around with not having contact. So it's kind of this. The most obvious one is an event, right? If you have an event, you have no chance without contacting them. But even if you use it as a regular training ground, you probably will have to find some sort of solution. Yeah. So it's a hard question to ask. There's no easy answer to it. And it's very different in every country, It's not the same in Australia. Maybe if you hike in 2 hours to a highline spot, you are 100% sure that you will not see another person, You cannot say this in Switzerland, You can hike for 3 or 4 hours here and you will see 20 people there. So it's like, we're so small, we're so dense. Like we need to register every highline above 25-meter height to our national air traffic authority, right? Because we actually have to be afraid that a helicopter hits our highline. We have so many helicopters flying around here. So this is a very different access problem than you have in Australia, for example. Right?
I'm interested, some of the wins you guys have had, like events that you've held with good people where you've negotiated access, where you've been able to have it year after year. I'm interested about the permanent setups, like why they're important or if they're important, and competitions. I mean, are they important, and what's the benefit of some of these things?
Yes. So in the last couple of years, in terms of like perma-rigs, we've seen that pretty much every city in Switzerland now has access to perma-rigs. And they have been a real game changer. So having access to regular training possibilities, mostly obviously highlines in this case, usually in forests, usually not in direct line of sight of like passersby, or people seeing it, lots of people seeing it. But this has become a really a key thing for communities in general. So perma-rigs are important. In Bern, we managed to have a perma-rig in the middle of the city, a couple 100 meters from our parliamentary building. So actually, the politicians see us every single day slacklining on our perma-rig. So, I mean, this is another kind of level, but if you can manage such spots that are like in the middle of the city, very easy accessible, and also visible for everyone, it takes about 2 to 3 years, and everybody in the city knows you. So this is kind of a key element of actually getting to know the activity for the broad public. Everybody knows us. Everybody knows our name, has seen us, has videos on their cell phones. It's like classic. And usually for these perma-rig spots, especially if they are kind of in an urban space, one of the key arguments we usually bring up is competitions. So we tell them, okay, we want to build this perma-rig spot in a way that it can be used in a national or international competition in the future. And this line of communication is very well understood by officials. They encounter it all the time with all the other sports. So like towards officials, this is really important. Also indoor gyms. At university, we had the possibility to construct a gym from ground up, which they built newly, with all the anchors along the wall. And one of the key arguments for the university as well was to hold international competitions indoor in the winter. We did this now a couple times, so it's obviously classic trick lining. It's speed lining over ground. It's things like we do blind rodeo line competitions, we do rigging competitions, so like skill competitions in terms of rigging. These are usually fun competitions. It's not like maybe the trick liners take it a bit more serious, but the rest of us, we do it for the fun, and it's not a huge competition, not hundreds of people joining. It's 50 people joining this competition, and they come together for a weekend in a gym and have a good time. And it's gnarly weather outside anyway, so it's a good place to be. So having like this line of communication is very relevant to the outside. To the inside, not always so much. It's not everybody has to focus on competitions. Not everybody agrees on this being important for themselves, for their personal development. Lots of people see this as like, why do you need to do this now? Usually when they join the competition, they have more fun than they wouldn't have thought before. It's also something I see. So it's like they kind of see a little bit of challenge going on. We also do like these little group fun competitions in groups against each other and stuff. So you have like also always some collaborative aspects to it as well. And but at the end of the day, I think if you want sustainable access in urban areas, competitions are a key line of communication to the outside. You need that, and it's the easiest. Honestly, like to build infrastructure with the sole argument of holding a competition there actually works, right? And then actually telling them, look, we spend, I don't know, 20,000 euros on this setup, but we will actually be using it for 25 years every second day afterwards. So they create like infrastructure for then allowing a sustainable training. This is actually a very good way of arguing to also for them to spend money on your slackline anchors. So yeah, we have built lots of those. I'm a big fan, and I think they will be much more widespread in the future of these metal poles, which basically replace trees. So like artificial trees. We have the luck with one company from Switzerland producing those. So this is kind of they're close, and we also now found solutions where we don't have to pour concrete. So we can just have these huge ground screws that you put in, and you can always argue, okay, if this kind of spot doesn't work, if there's not enough people coming to this, or if you have some other future development there, you can say we can just remove it again, which is like an absolutely killer argument for most officials to actually allow like artificial trees, poles in specific areas where we wouldn't be slacklining otherwise, So like these multi-use spots where you have like some metal poles, but also some trees managed by the local club. So this is important insurance-wise. You also have to argument these are trainers, so they have like some sort of instructor certificate. For the highlining, obviously some sort of rigger certificate. They want to see a piece of paper to prove to them that these people know what to do. Right? The officials want to see that. And having like this whole thing, like an official setup, official instructors, riggers, allowing for potential competitions, allowing also maybe for events. All these things come together for getting access, especially in urban areas. So, because as you probably have had this experience as well, like we've been using trees since the beginning of slacklining, but actually city trees have a much higher value than like trees in a forest, because obviously they are managed closely. The officials have a responsibility for them to be healthy. So in specific areas, on specific spots, to have 1 or 2 or 3 of these metal artificial trees actually makes so much sense. And it also allows for very easy rigging. So people actually rig easier. In some areas, we can even leave the lines up because these are dedicated slackline areas. And you can just see like hundreds of people passing through every day going on the slackline because they don't have to rig it anymore. That's a game changer. And so we have now a couple of those spots here in Bern as well, 3-4 spots where slacklines are rigged 24/7, 365 days outdoor. And even in the winter, in the middle of the winter with snow, you can see people using it. So it's really, I think it really also broadens the aspect of people actually seeing slacklining and seeing it as a legit activity.
But then those lines being left overnight or unattended, like who would be liable? Wouldn't they be worried about that? The liability if someone gets hurt or trips over? Because Australia, people are very concerned about liability in regards to insurance and who is responsible for this and for that. People like trip over on the streets and they sue council. That's why council is really strict with rules and stuff like that in here.
Yeah.
So how do you manage that?
Yeah, good question. Trust. They learn to trust us. So they learn that, first of all, again, these early slackline parks, they were not legal. But they were there, the lines stayed up for 2-3 years, no accident happened. Obviously the spot was a good one, so there's no like bicyclists going by, not too many drunk people at night and so on, but they were in urban areas. What we also have are lots of these framed slacklines, so slacklines on a frame that you can actually move around. We use these a lot in the city, and they are also in public places. They're usually quite heavy, so we built them ourselves. They're not like the classic ones you can buy off the net, but we built them ourselves. They're like 30-35 kilos, so it's not something you just walk away with. And they're like 3-4 meters long, so they're super short, but everybody can step on it. Everybody can do a couple steps. And these were kind of a door opener for us. So these mobile slack racks kind of things, they kind of showed everyone that, okay, you can actually have these in public places. There's not really sabotage because people actually like them, so they don't want to destroy them. There's not just people tripping over it. Of course, you have people like falling and maybe hurting themselves a bit, but they learn to accept it because they learn to trust us. So yes, they are afraid of liability here as well. There's different ways to solve this problem. For example, one is to kind of clearly mark the area where slacklining happens and not allow like kids to just run into it or bicycles to drive through. So there's like urban planning ways to solve it. Then there is obviously some sort of contracting that you can do. So there's different ways of saying, okay, let's say if the lines stay up all the time, usually the city wants to own the lines and the poles because they consider it as like a sports area, right? So then it has to follow the entire legal framework of a sports area, which is quite restrictive, but you can compare it to other public sports areas, You just need to show them the comparison to what other things they do in public places concerning sport, right? And things like putting up warning signs and so on. Yes, it's also part of it. But at the end, you kind of need to also rig those lines which stay rigged in a way that an accident can almost not happen. So they need to be short, easy, visible, clearly marked, maintained, and so on. So it's a whole list of things that needs to be fulfilled. But then it's doable. And usually you have to start small, and they gain trust over time, and then the officials become a bit more brave in actually distributing slacklines in public places. But yeah, and then the official changes, and you start over again, right? So it's like it's a never-ending story. Yeah. And also, yeah, to be fair, it's maybe a bit easier in Switzerland than in Australia. We have really officials here that also are a bit braver, and they're not afraid of being sued all the time. And our legal system does not allow to sue that easily as yours does. So you really need to also, like, it's not just that you can, trip over and then get 100,000 or something. It's not going to happen. If the other person kind of did everything to prevent this, you still kind of intended to do this activity and you just fell, and that's just part of the game. But it has to do with trust, not only towards the official, but also like, you need to trust the users to also not sue the officials, which is hard. But then you have ways to kind of, build kind of the space that then allows, that does not just, make the direct link to suing someone. But yeah, it's harder. I understand. Definitely a difficult one. So the other solution would be to not leave the lines rigged all the time, but to just allow the anchors to be there and just allow, like the most restrictive way, but one that also works here, is to just allow club members to actually rig lines on those. And this is actually a strong argument for a local, right? So you need to be a member. Of course, not everybody will be a member, but that's normal that you have some visitors, some people just joining in for a single training. But if you go regularly, you need to be a member. And then this gives the city like confidence in actually allowing the activity. But it also gives you a way of gaining membership.
Okay, awesome. Well, I think we just passed an hour. I have one more question, and then I will hand over to Dan, and then Dan can finish it off and make his last couple questions. Something I was digging through the ISA website today, and I encountered this really cool research that you guys done a few years ago about tree protection and how you guys, laid out all the different types, different manufacturers and stuff like that, and how they behave on the trees, which one is better. In a access point of view, how important is tree protection, and how can we pass on to our members and to slackliners in the park that they should be using more tree protection and leading by example, because that's how, land managers will see us, as if we look after it. Can you just give your perspective on tree protection?
Yes. So to be honest, the whole story of tree protection was kind of one of the starts of access issues we had around, especially urban areas, right? So solving, or like partially solving, the tree protection problem was a crucial discussion we had, mostly with the managers of trees. This is organized differently all around the world. In Switzerland, it's the city gardening departments, which have their own like groups that only deal with trees. And every city has that, and they are also linked in a national federation for city gardening specifically with trees. And so again, networking. So go to this national structure that you will also have in some way, and also at the same time bottom up. So go to the local people that actually deal with the trees on a daily basis. So both sides, bottom up, top down. And then they had all these concerns, right? So you saw it on the website what the main concerns are. And this is now still being developed, and this is definitely not a discussion that is over now, but actually showing them that we care about the trees and using protection that is very visible to a third party and to also to them was one of the game changers that they started tolerating us on trees. So the tree protection discussion is very much a discussion on showing that you actually value these trees and that they can actually see that. Tree protection is the thing they see. So having like a bright red or yellow or green tree protection on the tree, and you place your sling nicely around it, not allowing for friction. Tree protection actually also distributes the pressure on the bark. So it also has a pressure aspect to it. It's not just friction. And showing them this through research and actually arguing, and also like showing them the strength of wood, like the forces involved in slacklining compared to the strength of wood. This really, like, they got respect for us, right? So they started respecting also our research. It's like really showing them that you actually value these trees, that you don't just want to use them, but you also really like them and you want to show that to them. And you also have to see their perspective. Like their perspective in Europe, at least, is for 150 years, they wouldn't allow anyone to attach anything to a tree. Never. For parties, for like commercial banners, for, whatever. They would always say no. And then suddenly a slackliner comes and just puts up the slackline on a tree on a regular basis. So for them, it's like an absolute no-go. Why should we allow this? It's ridiculous, right? And so that's their perspective on this. And to get them to tolerate us takes time, it takes effort, it takes lobbying. You have to talk to all these. And some will always say, no, I'm not going to allow this, right? And then with these people, you have to kind of find alternatives. You have to find, as I said before, maybe it's metal poles, maybe it's in other spot. So there's always places where you will not be able to rig your slackline. That's just so. Actually, this whole tree protection discussion for me is crucial. People need to understand that showing officials that you value the trees by using tree protection, wide tree protection, they're not stupid. They know that if you have like a narrow tree protection and the sling just slides underneath, the whole friction discussion is useless. So it needs to be big enough to take up the friction of your sling. It needs to distribute the pressure. So it's not just the tree protection, it's also a wide enough sling. They also need to understand that our forces are not so high, which obviously is not true if you tension up like 100-meter tight long line. Forces get higher if you trick line, right? So you need to tell them, okay, but if I trick line, I'm not going to use this 30 centimeter tree. I'm going to use a bigger tree then, because it has a larger surface area, it can distribute the pressure. So you need to hold all these discussions with them so they understand that you actually have a nuanced perspective on this as well. It's not just, I want to use your tree however, So, and then also educating, obviously, your fellow slackliners is a huge undertaking for you, right? But at the end of the day, the argument, like, okay, look, just use this tree protection, don't use this and this and this tree, but I give you a better alternative. And if you don't do it, you will just lose access completely, or you even have to pay a fine, is a strong argument towards most slackliners. So even though I don't like to bring that argument, but it's honestly true, and we had people being fined here for using trees wrongly. So this actually happened. It's not just a fantasy thing, and usually it just takes losing one spot where you're not allowed anymore, or somebody gets fined and they start to learn. But you can already bring up these arguments beforehand, and then also offering easy access to good tree pro, right? So we learned, okay, first of all, if you buy a slackline kit, usually there's no tree pro involved. Then you buy extra tree pro. It's usually not the ideal tree pro. So what we did is actually, as a national federation, we started producing our own tree pro. It was so important for us. So we have a huge storage of tree pro here. And most clubs, the local clubs, they buy this Tree Pro at a really good price from us, like at the cost of production, and they actually hand it out to their new members for free. That's one thing some clubs do. Other clubs have at their regular spots, they have little gear bunkers, right? So they have like a storage space, can be on private land just next to the spot, can be even in the public place. It's like one thing you can discuss with these officials. You can say, okay, look, we need good Tree Pro on site. People don't want to bring these big chunky Tree Pros, right? So can we not have like a little storage space here with 10 Tree Pros, and every member can just, get a Tree Pro before they're rigged. They don't need to bring it themselves. So it's like giving easy access to cheap and good quality Tree Pros was a key thing. Tree Pros it's not even a discussion that much more. It's we kind of had this discussion for so long with so many people. Like nowadays, if you go rig in the park and you don't have a Tree Pro, people start looking at you weird. You need to change something, right? So like having this change in culture takes years, but you can kind of incubate it a bit by allowing access to good, affordable Tree Pro at the spots where you really need it. So I think these would be my words towards Tree Pro.
Thanks, man. We've got a lot out of that. I'm inspired myself to go and organise some perm rigs in my local city, negotiate access for that. I'm inspired to keep working for access to continue the gatherings and not let those fall by the wayside. If someone's listening and they've got an access issue, or they're thinking, gee, I should go negotiate perma rigs like they do in Switzerland, is there any final words of advice you have for someone, I guess, in a community and they want to do a bit more with this?
I'd say talk to people, try to build long-term relationships and networks. And one of the most important things is just be persistent. It's like try to be persistent as an individual, try to motivate people around you to also get in contact with these officials. And, if they say no, just stay at it, rethink your possibilities, and come back later. Just be persistent is one of the key things. If you manage to get access, you get access for usually dozens of years down the road. Hundreds, if not thousands of people will profit from this. So it's worth being persistent and just stay at it, work hard, and it's worth it for the activity, for the community. It's one of the key aspects of getting slacklining as a legit activity in our everyday lives. Yeah.
Well, yeah, thanks again, Thomas. Thanks, Arthur, for co-hosting with me, and appreciate very much you sharing all your experience on the call with us.
Sure.
Thank
Thanks
you
a lot
very
for
much.
having me, and awesome podcast you guys have. Congratulations on it, and hope to hear many more in the future.
Awesome. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, man.
See you on the next one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.